Please enjoy this feature presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. This program may contain adult content and is intended for mature audiences only.
Radioactive is sponsored by CrookedRiverRadio.com. Crooked River Radio is an internet radio station that is live 24/7 playing rock and adult contemporary top 40 hits from the 60s through the 90s. You can find us on Live 365, Simple Radio, Roku, Radio Garden, and even Alexa, as well as our website. Come on and join us on the Crooked River.
The story you are about to see is true. However, the names were changed to protect the imbeciles.
Ladies and gentlemen, here it is. The most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
Welcome to Radioactive. Join us as we look at technology and life in the world around us, and have a little fun with it too. I'm Pat Morrow, and
This is Jon Brown.
I'm Erik Nanarrone.
I'm Flora Morrow.
And
I'm Dale Miracle, and this is Radioactive.
good evening, everybody. We're back. Can you believe it? Have y'all missed us? Yeah, I'll bet y'all missed us.
Sure, dear.
Yeah, I'm sure too, dear. Yeah.
Good evening to our guest.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a second. Welcome back, everybody. We've been on hiatus now for, 3 weeks? 2 weeks?
2 weeks at
2.
least.
It seems like a month. But we're back. I do want to elaborate here on what Flora just said. We do want to welcome our guest. The guy's he's a legend, man. I followed him and listened to him for most of my teenage life, to be honest about it. He's really, I don't know how many stations he's been on. I knew HLO was one of them, but it's so great to have you, Steve. I'm so glad you decided to come in with us tonight. Everybody, welcome. Let me get the cue thing here. Everybody, welcome Mr. Steve Boom Boom Cannon.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I've worked actually all over Ohio. Dayton, Columbus twice, Cleveland twice, and in Akron.
Did you ever do, were you ever with Wixie? I know I credited you with that once or twice. Did you ever do anything with WXY? Up there in Cleveland?
I actually missed the question, and I apologize. Your volume is very low.
Yeah, you're a little bit on the low side, too. I don't know why. Let me make sure I didn't bump something here. I was wondering, did you ever do anything with Wixie Radio? 12?
No.
No?
Nope.
I wasn't sure if you did or not. I remember from WHLO, so that's where I remember you from. Anyway, good to have you. I hear you're a movie trivia expert.
To a degree, yes.
A dear friend of ours, Jerry, was telling me that we should ask you some trivia questions about movies and that. Why don't you tell us how you started out in radio? Where'd you get your start at?
Well, a buddy of mine went to a private school in New Hampshire, and he had two brothers, who were in school with him. The school also had a school radio station, which was about 5 watts, and it covered the city of, I think it was Laconia, New Hampshire. At any rate, those two guys came home with my buddy Mike, and I got to know them and got interested in radio. I was business administration at Northeastern University, psychology at Boston University, but none of it really was satisfying me, and my father wanted me to go into business world, but these two guys kind of intrigued me. And after a while, I just said, what they're doing is fun and interesting, and I would like to try to do it myself. So I went to broadcasting school. I drove a school bus days, and I went to school from 6 until 9. And at 10 o'clock, I produced the Jerry Williams talk show on WMEX in Boston. Well, I kind of got into the talk thing through Jerry Williams, but I was a DJ for 13 years before I got into talk full time. And basically that's it. My father said, "A disc jockey? Are you kidding?" And my mother said, "Jack, leave him alone. He'll do well." Well, as recently as the late 1970s, I don't think my father really knew what I did for a living, even though he had come to visit me in Akron with my mother.
Really?
Yeah. There's a story about that. You want to hear the story?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Milton Berle was appearing in the Akron, Canton area. And I got to know Milton Berle. And we talked a little bit, and we hung out a bit, and he and I went to Lou and High's Delicatessen in Akron.
Oh, God, Lou and High's. I love that place.
I loved Lou K, and I loved High Pot Rock, and I loved Alan, who was the son of one of the two guys. Anyway, I found out that Milton was going to the Parker Playhouse in Fort Lauderdale, and he was going to do Funny Thing Happen on the way to the Forum after he finished working in the Akron Canton area. Well, anyway, I called Milton in Fort Lauderdale, and I said, "Can I get my parents a couple of tickets to the play? They love Parker Playhouse." Well, Milton said, "Look, not just the tickets. You tell them to speak to somebody in charge at Parker Playhouse. I want them back in my dressing room after I complete my performance." Well, I'm thrilled and shocked. And so my mother and father go back and they meet with Milton Berle, and I call Milton a week later. And I said, "How did it go with my mother and father?" "Well, your mother is a delightful lady, but I don't think your father knows what you do for a living." I said, what do you mean by that?" "Well, I was trying to put in a plug for you." And Milton Berle said to my dad, "Do you know you have a very talented son?" Which is a great compliment of itself. My father's response, "Well, I don't know how talented it is, but he's a good son." So that was why I always thought my father never really knew what I did for a living.
Well, dreams do come true. And when you make decisions like that, you got to follow your heart a lot of
And
times.
that's exactly what I did. I started in Berlin, New Hampshire for under $100 a week, working 7 days a week. And every new experience, every new station I worked at, I learned something new. I never got to finish school because I was hired right out of school by
Really?
the owner of that Berlin, New Hampshire radio station. And I worked for him for, I believe, 2 years. And very honestly, I learned a lot.
What year did you, I hate to age us or anything, but what year did you start into radio?
On the air, I think it was 1962.
Oh, Beatles and all the good music. I can see.
Well, that I would have loved that to happen. But on my first job, they had a 7 to midnight show called Music from Studio X. I know more about Madhavani and Carmen Caballero than any grown adult has a right to know. That's the music we played. I almost fell asleep several times in the middle of my own show because the music was just that laid back. But I had a good happening because of it. Our program director was a guy who loved hockey. He was from Boston, a Bruins fan. And he would go on the road with our local hockey team because we broadcast the games on our radio station. Well, I would have to take his afternoon show. So at 5 o'clock, we ran the Yankee Network News Service, which was all over New England. Then the news director gave me the local news copy. I read the local news, and then B. Russo, the water commissioner of the city of Berlin, New Hampshire, who sounded just like the great Gildersleeve, came in and did the same news I did, but did it in French.
Wow.
Because in Berlin, New Hampshire, if you worked on Pleasant Street or Main Street, you had to be bilingual. That's how close to Canada we were.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine
I was
that.
thinking. I lived in Vermont for a while, so.
And northern Vermont also has the French influence. Yep. Well, I'm a New Englander by origin. I'm from the Boston area, a town called Brookline.
Really? I didn't know that. I'm kidding.
But I got to tell you, the job that I got transferred to in Akron was something I will never forget, because I look at Ohio as being my adopted home state.
Where did you start in Ohio?
Akron?
Oh, I mean, what station? Was it HLO?
WHLO.
Yeah, I seem to remember that.
This was the pic. They took a picture of me for a publicity piece.
Wow.
And that was what I looked like back in the day. But I really did not like this flyer. One of the reasons.
He locked up anyway. I don't know about anybody else, but he's locked up. Justine's moving.
Yeah, we're not locked here.
Okay.
Steve, I don't know if you can hear us, but you locked up on us.
Can you type something in the message in the chat?
I'll
Why don't
do
you
it.
text him?
Okay, Erik.
Yeah, he dropped down.
He must have.
Oh, there he is. He's back.
I'm back.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Well, anyway, as I said, the station and the Amonial Company, which is now, of course, Macy's, used to bring me in on Saturday at noon, and I would do a live show with live celebrities in front of a live audience. And that was great fun. I had a ball doing that.
And what years were you down at HLO?
I'm sorry?
What years were you down at WHLO?
74 through 77.
Did you know Billy Hassel? William
Yeah,
Hassel?
I did.
I actually used to work with him and his mother.
Johnny Andrews was my first program director, and then George Yoakum, who I'm still friendly with, he and his wife, Linda, and I were very close. And that was my second program director until I left. We had a good time together, and what basically happened was John Potter called me from WTVN in Columbus and offered me nights. And I took the job.
What do you think about radio nowadays?
It's kind of not the same. Well, kind of is a loose word to describe what I'm thinking. Back in the day, there were only a certain number of radio stations and television stations one entity could own. FCC rules and regs. And now, I'm afraid Clear Channel and iHeart dominate the industry. I have no idea how many hundreds of stations they either program or actually own.
Yeah, and that's where I gotta agree with you there. That's where it's pretty much all kind of, you're getting almost monotonous programming. You're getting, cookie cutter stuff. And that's a shame that's happened that way. And when they do have something good, they all of a sudden they go right in the center of it and wreck it. I know there's been several stations around here just recently that have changed. They changed formats. Of course, they did that back in the 60s too. They changed format at the drop of a hat. But what's been happening around here lately, they have a morning crew that's doing really well. They decide they don't like it and that they drop it. Or they got to save money by, instead of having 6 people on the show, they only have to have 1 or 2. And I've never agreed with that type of operation.
I still think there are listeners who would like a little more local talent.
Yeah, I do too.
I was just gonna say, it seems like stations more want to go with syndicated stuff versus having a local DJ or even the all automated, where they have no DJs at all, like a certain iHeart station that up in Cleveland.
It's easy and it's cheap, and that pays the bills for them anyway. I actually knew the guy who's now in charge at Clear Channel. We worked together in Detroit, and he was a crackerjack programmer. And I heard that when he left Detroit, he went to Chicago and made a country station #1.
Wow.
So
And that's hard to do.
Or did know what he's doing.
In the past, we've had in fact, a couple of weeks ago, we had a guy that owns two radio stations in Elyria, or up in Lorain County. Oberlin. And he was, there was certain answers I thought I would get from him that we did. One was, can you make any money in radio? And right from the drop of a hat, he said no. But, it's that pretty much that way with the internet and its entrance to the streaming and everything like that, like we're doing here. I can see where some of the stuff would be able to make money, and I can sure see where it wouldn't. The fees that you've got to pay to these record companies and everything for their for the use of their product is just out of this world, and it's not on a fair basis. Just because you're on the internet means you got to pay all these fees and everything, where the over-the-air stations a lot of time are getting away without doing much, if any, of it. It doesn't seem like it's fair to me. But then again, you put a podcast out. I'm sorry about the dogs. You put a podcast out, and there, the podcast, if you get 2,000 or 3,000 hits, you're gonna start making some money off of that. And just because of
to be the thing right now. It's interesting. I've been approached a couple of times to do a podcast. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine, Father Jim Drucker, he was a former WARM DJ and music promoter and music producer and record hyper, you name it, he's done it. And he went into the priesthood. He now holds the rank of captain of the United States Air Force. He's a chaplain. But he never forgot his contacts. And there is someone that is approaching he and I to do an oldies podcast. Jim is called Philadelphia's Doo-Wop Priest. Look him up online and you will see what he's done in his lifetime, including being in the Army during Vietnam and being in the Air Force during Desert Storm, plus maintaining his contacts in the music business and in radio. And we are in the process of looking into possibly doing something for a company that runs several well-received podcasts, but it may not happen. But at any rate, that's the future, it seems.
The thing you're going to be fighting with that is the record labels and DCMA and all that. They're going to want reimbursement from whatever you're using. That's the reason. I've had enough experience with the podcasts here. We're running 5. I've been here for about 3 years now. And we do 5 podcasts. And there isn't a week that goes by I don't get dinged for something or another by way of the platforms that we put them out on. If you're going to go through Spreaker or one of the podcast places, that's one thing. But if you're doing live like we do, you got to really be careful, because when it records, they're going to shut you off right in the center of it. Facebook is notorious for doing that crap. And
very much so. There are people, friends of mine who I'm close to on Facebook, who say, "I'm back." And I would say, "Why? Where were you?" I was in Facebook prison.
Yeah, Facebook jail.
We know a couple people.
I know a couple people that have been there. Right, Ellie?
Yeah, I was going to say one usually is a listener.
The thing that you're fighting, and that as long as you talk about a song or whatever you're playing, a bit that you use or whatever. Like I usually go to YouTube and find clips from there. As long as you talk about them, you have no problem because that's fair use. You know, that's the Fair Use Act. But you have to actually be able to stop, or you have to be able to sit and talk about whatever you've played. And a lot of times I'll get dinged for something, and right now as it sits on each of my computers, I've got a thing called the Fair Use Act in a text file. And that Fair Use Act is the first thing I hit them with. I don't care if it's YouTube, I don't care if it's Facebook or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, they back off on you. There are times where they just flat out they tell you no. And, you know, it's not fair because you don't have the right to dispute it. You know,
but then there are creative rights to be looked out for as well.
Yeah, this is true, and I understand that. But, you know, if it's a topic for discussion, you know, it's just like the freedom of speech. You know, I'm allowed to say anything I want to, pretty much, unless it steps on somebody's toes or hurts somebody or something like that. But, you know, it gets pretty disturbing when the thing that gets me is all this crap is logarithms. That's what actually pins you. I get dinged for stuff that I did 3 years ago that the logarithm just picked up on. I had 3 bits that we did at the beginning of 2020, and about a month ago I got dinged for all 3 of them at one time or another. And there was 30 seconds. I was doing testing on Facebook's there. It was before we came up with this broadcaster, and I was doing some testing, and I accidentally left the stuff on there. 35 second clips. I was getting dinged for them. This is Warner Brothers has claimed the right to your video. Oh, give me a break. 3 years ago. Give me a break. And you know, people think that I complain about this stuff all the time, but the whole thing of it is it's just not fair. If it was fair, I'd not say a word. And that's the whole thing in a nutshell. You have to, when you do podcasting like that, you got to watch that kind of stuff, and I know that. Will it keep me from putting something on? Probably not. But if I get dinged for it, well, I'll just complain about it, and if it ain't right, then I'll just take it off.
Well, in reality, many of the artists in the early days of rock and roll were taken advantage of by record companies and by producers and you name it.
And I understand that.
They're a little tight-lipped now. They're very cautious to be sure that the people involved with making that kind of music gets appropriately compensated. And I see nothing wrong with that. Don't be ridiculous about it, but I see nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
I agree with you there. The thing with us is, you know, I actually do pay licensing fees for the station, and I go through what they call Live 365. It's a they actually have their own platform. They have their own broadcast. You can actually live feed them and everything like that, and it works out pretty well most of the time. I never get any problems from that. Where I get the problems from is when we do the podcasts, and if you pay. The thing that also sets me off is the fact that if I put 10 seconds of a song on there and they ding me for that, and yet I go to Facebook and find all kinds of nude pictures and everything else on a publicly oriented platform like that where it's got children on it, that's disturbing. That's all there is to it. If they're going to cut one thing, they ought to cut it all.
There used to be, and I don't know if it still is, there used to be a rule about how many seconds or minutes of a specific song you could play without having to pay for it.
They don't pay any attention to that here.
Was or is even.
I thought it was 30 seconds at one point.
Okay, that's what I thought too.
but I don't think they pay any attention to that anymore.
Oh boy.
If you put 10 or 15 seconds of music on, you're done. And they'll get you every time. But unless, like I say, if it's on my station here, then it's another thing. I can play pretty much whatever I will like. But when we first started out on Live 365, we had an issue with them with the advertisements. They wouldn't allow you to advertise to make any money.
Huh.
They just said you are going to play our ads, and that's it. And then about a year after we joined over there, they loosened all that up. Now I'm actually allowed to put commercials and that inside our podcasts and what have you, which is a heck of a lot better than it was. As far as some of the other platforms, we're usually available on Spreaker. I've got a Spreaker account that is a commercial account here. And they do pretty well for us. We usually get 200 or 300 hits, about 200 or 300 a week sometimes, and we don't do bad there as long as I get the time to put the stuff over there. Which, being I retired for the second time back in August of last year, and I actually put 30 years in at Chrysler.
Why did you retire the first time?
The plant moved. The plant was going. They tore the plant down, and it was just, you could see the writing on the walls. It was time to go.
And too many pipers to dance to, that kind of thing?
That's about it. So I left there. Well, I put myself through college, and of course I made the bills for that. And when I got out of college, I had to do something as far as making the bills. So
I did the same thing.
So I picked
the
up
front door, not the back door. I mean, that was how I put myself through college.
I picked up
I'm kidding.
a job at a local courier company over here, and I worked for them for 6 years up until last August 6th. It was a year ago, August 6th. And since then, I've been retired, and I'm not missing it. The money gets tight here and there, but you just buckle down and do what you got to do. I don't ever see myself going back to work. It'd be nice to have a little bit of an income from this stuff, but I'm not sure that's even going to ever happen, just because of the way the rules are.
I would go back and do it, even at this age, if someone would hire me part-time. That's no joke.
I'll tell you what.
I love the business. I've enjoyed my time doing it, 45 years, and I still have good energy and fair knowledge and think I could handle it. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I've been retired since 2005.
Really? I went out in 2009. I don't think you're much. You're too far ahead of me.
In a budgetary move, I was replaced with Sean Hannity. And I had been. That was okay with me. The funny part about it was, my wife said to me, "Don't even bother to look for a new job. We're retiring. Let's go home." So we moved back to her hometown.
Sometimes that's the way it works. My wife doesn't want me to go back either. I don't think I.
But then people came looking for me. So,
right, Flora?
I help out whenever I can.
Right, Flora?
Certainly not doing what you were doing anyhow.
Yeah, the job I had was pretty physical anyway. I was a tire delivery. I delivered tires I took pharmacy to hospitals.
My Linda got sick and tired of being alone at night. So she said, "Why don't you see if they'll hire me to produce your show?" And my boss wouldn't at first, but then he did. And she was my producer for 10 years.
If you decide to do a podcast, you're all, just let us know, and you're welcome here. I can help you get it set up or whatever. It's I've got no problem doing that. Anything for the good of the business here. But just let us know if you decide you want to do one.
There's only one of the celebrities that I interviewed over my years that I'm still close to. And he and his wife and I talk from time to time. And that is Pete Cochran. You know who that is?
I know that name.
Pete Cochran was the character played by Michael Cole on the Mod Squad.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And he and I talk on the phone at least 4 times a year. And he's got a wonderful wife named Shelley. And he has a large audience on Facebook. And he's still a nice guy. He really is a nice guy. And we got the funny story. I had heard that there was going to be a celebrity event hosted by, I think he was called the Cool Ghoul in New York City. He was in his 90s at that point, but still hosted this thing in Parsippany, New Jersey. And I saw one of the people who would be attending would be Michael Cole. I said, God, I haven't seen him for 35 years. I'm going to have to go. So I went, and he was in a room with Michael Gross from the guy who was in the Tremors movies.
That
think.
doesn't ring a
Ever
bell
seen
here.
Tremors? The Tremors
I
movies?
remember the Tremors movie, but I names escape me.
It was so goofy. It was kind of a spoof on monster movies, and it was fun to watch. He also worked with Michael J. Fox as his father on the show on television.
Oh, I know
yeah,
who you're talking.
okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Michael Gross was in the same room, and so was Bing Crosby's daughter, who was on Star Trek: The Next Generation. She played the chief of security on the Enterprise, and they're all there signing autographs. And I'm standing by Michael Gross, and suddenly Michael Cole looks over at me, squints a little bit, and says, "Oh my word, it's you!" So we rekindled our friendship, and we have remained friendly ever since. So he's a nice guy, a very good actor also. We've had, Linda and I were very, very lucky to be able to do what we did and what I did for 45 years. And I've gotten to meet some very interesting and entertaining people and actually bring them to an audience. And I enjoyed doing it.
We got nothing but praise for that, and I'm one that as I was growing up, there were certain people I remember, as far as actors and even personal life stuff, and I always remember the DJs that I've listened to. We had the John Lanigan in the morning over there on GAR.
Yep.
We had Superhost. Remember?
Marty Sullivan.
Marty Sullivan, yeah, Superhost. We had the Ghoul. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
The Ghoul and Ghoulardi. Ernie Anderson started that.
I know who they were. And then, of course, it became Big Chuck and Little John.
Yeah, and Tim Conway actually got his start from over here, too. I don't know if you knew that or not. He actually started at WJW. And he was.
I missed the period on the Ghoul when Tim Conway was part of their cast. I would have loved to have seen Tim Conway in those days when he was in Cleveland television. That would have been terrific.
If you get a chance, look up Ghoulardi and Tim Conway.
Okay.
And on YouTube. I know there's clips there. I've actually watched them before. You'll find 2 or 3 of the bits that he did there, and he was actually with Big Chuck and Little John a couple of times too. He's remembered his roots, or he did, and it's always kind of cool to see him on the show. There's that show for that Ghoulardi through Big Chuck and Little John had such a following. It was incredible. And, for a local show like that, people in Michigan used to watch it and everything like that.
It was amazingly fun to watch. They did a great job. All of the hosts of that show did a wonderful job, the ones that I got to see.
That, after Ghoulardi and then came The Ghoul, which was on Channel 61 back.
Yeah.
And that was actually Ron Sweet, I think his name was. I actually had met him a couple of times through a friend of mine. he was as wacky in person as he was on the flipping air. He was always off the wall. But it's thinking back even to the DJs that I listened to. There was a few of them that you kind of wondered, even like Howard Stern, which was a shock jock and all that. I remember when he first started out, I used to listen to him. But then we got into the local radio people. Sweet Richard from over here at CUE. You remember that dude? There was 2 or 3 CUE people there that ended up going other places. I think some ended up at HLO. But whenever I heard the name Steve Boom Boom Cannon, that always picked up the attention there. I
Boom
remember.
Boom Cannon thing came from a friend of mine who I was visiting actually over the weekend back in Boston. I went to see a cousin of mine on Cape Cod and then drove up to Boston, and my buddy Artie and I had a nice Chinese meal together. And he's the guy, I won't mention his last name, but Artie's the guy that said, "Why don't you call yourself Steve Boom Boom Cannon? Because you're always shooting off your mouth anyway." And that's how it all came to pass. But I got to tell you something. Like many radio professionals, I've had 6 or 8 names over my career. And due to the fact that the radio stations I would be working for would have only one jingle available. So I had to be the person whose name was on the jingle. So at WFEA in Manchester, New Hampshire, I was Jim Long, the Midday Man. Then when I worked for a guy that I really liked a lot, I worked for him at 2 stations, but when I worked for him in Spartanburg, South Carolina, I was Big Dan Alexander. That's the jingle they had. Then I worked in Fall River, Massachusetts, and the jingle they had was for the Great Scott. I said, that's silly. I can't be just the Great Scott. So I made them change it, and it wound up being Frank Scott, the Great Scott. And then when I left him and went to Providence, I was called the Remarkable Stephen Allen Scott. Now, Allen is my middle name, and the worst encounter with a station owner was at WSMN in Nashua, New Hampshire. I said, "I'm Steve Cannon." "No, I don't like the name. I want something with a more impact." He said, "Okay, what's your middle name?" I said, "Allen." "Well, you're going to be the other Steve Allen." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm a Steve Allen fan. I would not usurp the man's name just for the sake of ratings." He said, "You want the job? You're the other Steve Allen." So I was that.
You were
That's what I put up with my first 20 years in radio.
The other Steve Allen.
Yeah.
It's crazy how they would make people change their name. I know of a story, a guy named Jack Reynolds. I listen to his son all the time. You know who that is, Pat. And when he got into radio, his program director was like, "No, you're not using your last name. You're going to be Jack Reynolds."
What was his reaction?
He's like, "Okay."
And I did an okay a couple of times too.
I think was it George Burns and Allen?
Yeah.
That's not his name. That was a name that was given to him because of Pat might remember his real name, but his name was
I do.
Oh, you
Nathan
do?
Birnbaum.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. I remember that too. Go ahead, Dale. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to bring that up because I remember watching. I can't remember if it was when Johnny Carson was still on the Tonight Show or if it was when
Somebody was filling in?
No, the guy that Jay Leno.
Par?
When Jay Leno was either filling in for him or took over for the show, and I
Okay.
remember he had, I think it was George's 90th birthday. It was some accolade, some achievement of age, and he had him on there just to interview him and to celebrate his birthday. And that was one of the things that they talked about, because he was asking him about his days in vaudeville and in the start of the dawn of radio, and how he did the Burns and Allen show and all this stuff. And Jay made the comment saying that, many people don't really realize that you've been a pseudonym for 60, 70 years of your life. And he shook his head and he said, would you like to tell the audience your given name? And he said, his real name, and people were like, wow, because everybody knew him for like 70 some years as George Burns.
Jimmy Stewart changed his image somewhat during the 1950s to a degree by starting to do Westerns. And I love Westerns, so I've researched and looked into and watched. And there was a young actor who had a small part as a cavalry corporal, I guess he was, under the name of Anthony Curtis. Well, come to find out, that was the name given to him by the studio. He became Tony Curtis. But who was going to watch a movie with Bernie Schwartz starring in it? And that actually happened, Robert Taylor. His real name was Spangler Arlington Brew.
Wow.
Cary Grant was Archie Leach. That was his real name.
Bob Hope was Leslie Hope.
And that became the rule of thumb to come up with an impactful name that would work on screen, on movie credits, that kind of thing. I can name, well, I can't actually name them, but I can name several other people whose real names are nothing like the name we know them by,
Like Charlie Sheen, his given name.
Well, his name is really Estevez.
Yeah, it was
and
Chaz.
The only member of the family that kept the name was Emilio.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I do
He's
see
part of Spanish heritage.
I do see we had somebody pop in here. And before he tries to escape or anything, let me introduce you to your old friend there, Steve, Mr. Jerry Sorensen.
The last time that Steve saw me, by the way, Steve was very popular in Akron, Ohio. His popularity cannot be stressed enough. But I worked with Steve at WHLO in Akron, and I was in the news department at the time. Now, Steve would not remember me because I was a 17-year-old teenager at the time. Didn't look anything like I look today. It's been a lot of years, but what a following this man had. And he knows more about everything than anybody that I've ever met in my entire life. This gentleman right here.
I wish it were true. We had Dave Lieberth was a terrific news director, and of course, Lord forgive me, he went on to the Akron Beacon Journal as a reporter, and I can't remember his name now. And last time I was in Akron, I stopped to see this Carney, Jim Carney. Okay.
Yes.
Was also in his department, as was Steve Fullerton.
Right. What a great guy.
We had a great news department. A story that maybe you didn't know, and maybe nobody knew. We had on Sunday on WHLO a Serbo-Croatian show, and Steve produced the show.
Now, I didn't know that Steve produced that, but that's good trivia right there.
Job. Well, anyway, the Serb and the Croat got into a fight because one said, you're playing too much Croatian music. The other one said, you're too much Serbian music. And Florida's had to break them up. A
Oh,
story
that is
I
good
haven't
stuff.
told for years. That was I got to tell you something, guys. We had at WHLO one of the best news departments I ever worked with. It was terrific. And
Well, we had a guy working for us that in, I believe, 1977 and 1978, probably the best voice that I ever heard news-wise. And his name was Larry States. And Larry went on to WAKR and served out the rest of his career over there until his retirement. I left WHLO and went to college to study communications, and I got hired by NBC after that. So there were a lot of guys that went a lot of different places after WHLO. But we had a great staff at the time. We were right at the top of the ratings. Steve was always just a fantastic presentation in Akron. I think we were doing it as well or better than anybody in Northeast Ohio during that period of time. But then again, my opinion is biased because I lived it. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, the
but
funny
it was
part
good
about
stuff.
it is my last program director at WHLO was Nick Anthony.
Yes, great
Nick
guy.
Anthony is now the consultant for Rubber City Radio, and
Mm-hmm.
I think he may have hired Larry States.
You know, that's an entirely possible scenario. And I still talk to him on Facebook. But now Larry, I've not talked to in a couple of years, but last I knew he was still in good health. And what a great voice. We had a lot of talent on that station during that period of time.
I got to tell you all a fast story. I was known for doing celebrity interviews, as I'm sure you remember.
Yes.
And I love doing it. I'm having a good time meeting people I never thought I would ever meet, you know. It's 1977, I think it was. I get a phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning from the station. Steve, get out of bed and get down here quickly. Wait a minute, 6 o'clock in the morning. I want you here by 9 o'clock. Why do you want me in so early? Elvis died.
That was 1978, Steve.
78, yeah. And I went on
78
at 9 o'clock in the morning and stayed on until 6 o'clock that night, except for the noon news and newscasts each hour. And all I did was field phone calls from the audience about the passing of Elvis Presley. It was
amazing. What an amazing story. What a story to be a part of at that time.
Absolutely. And I found during the show, I remembered that Pat Boone was working in Pittsburgh. So I called him and said, would he come on the show and talk about Elvis? Well, I found out that he and Elvis had stayed close up until the end. They were always good friends, although Elvis didn't talk about it. And Pat Boone went on for an hour. Then in the middle of all of that, I got a phone call. And whoever producing my show said, you better take this call. I said, why? He'll put a curse on you. Rex Humbard called me from the tower on top of Cuyahoga Falls.
Right.
He admitted that he was one of Elvis's religious advisors at the end of his life.
Wow, that is a bombshell.
Absolutely. And talked about how Elvis was working at getting back to being more religious than he had been. As a matter of fact, I think one of Elvis's biggest selling records was a 33, an album of religious songs, hymns and religious songs and that kind of thing. And that was one of his biggest selling albums, and he loved doing it. But toward the end of his life, according to Rex Humbard now, he was looking to get more into his religion again and went to Rex for advice on that particular topic.
I think that's a fascinating story. You know, there are a couple of events that have occurred down through the years where everybody can say they remember what they were doing at the time that the event occurred. A good example might be the day that Kennedy was shot. We all remember what we were doing when John Kennedy was shot. We remember what we were doing on 9/11, which is something we're thinking about today. And we remember what we were doing, where we were when we got the news that Elvis died.
And that maybe in our lifetimes, those are the three events I
Yes.
think that people most remember. Now it's going to be the passing of QE2, obviously. Uh, Queen Elizabeth was quite a woman. She was,
You know what? Everybody got caught up in the whole thing with the royals. No matter who you were, it seems like there was some interest with the royals. And I always thought she deserved a better family than she
me too. What's really funny too is I know a woman who is English by origin. She is distantly related to me because one of my cousin's wives, it's her mother. So anyway, we've been talking over the past few weeks, and she's astonished that after all of the years that we put in trying to beat the British and be independent, we now have all become Anglophiles, that in fact we love the Queen and the royal family as much as the British do. You know?
Yes. Yes, we do. It is amazing.
And
How can a person how can that person have that much influence here? But they do. The royal family just captivates America. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I find it fascinating as well. Here we tried to get away from them and now we want to be with them again, you know. So funny.
I'll tell you the biggest story that I ever covered, and I think you had gone at that point. I'm not sure, but the biggest story that I ever covered for WHLO as a news guy was when Thurman Munson put his plane down at the Canton Akron Airport, crashed his plane into the ground. That was the biggest story I was ever involved in, and I almost got jailed over that story. I was up at the scene, and the sheriff's department did not appreciate the fact that the media had come upon the scene and that I was there. And at one point, he told me that if I didn't depart the premise, I was going to be taken out to the jail and thrown into jail for doing my job. And that was reporting the news. Those were very different days back then.
Yep, very much so. One of the fun things that happened to me, and you may or may not remember this incident, there was a show being produced. Now, disaster shows are big deals now.
Yes.
But back in the 70s, there was a company that was going to produce a show about famous disasters in history. The first show was going to be the crash of the Hindenburg.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who reported that particular, remember all the humanity, remember that guy?
Right.
He was in our production room recording the opening for that particular program. It was going to be their kickoff show. And I actually got to meet him and talk to him.
That's awesome.
A stunning event. I'm a celebrity interviewer, not necessarily a newsworthy kind of guy. But bingo, there he is, and I couldn't shut up. It was amazing to meet him. Yeah.
You did get some great interviews back in the day. Anybody that was anybody was on your show. And I'll tell you what, when you put a trivia question out there, the phones just lit up. People were lined up for that. They just loved that. And that was a good fit in Akron radio, Northeast Ohio radio at the time. So, my friend, I have to depart. Unfortunately, had I known you were going to be here, I'd have been able to block off more time. But I do have a meeting I have to go to. But it was only right that I come in tonight and pay deference to the king of all media. and there he is. And how good to see you. And I'm so happy that you're healthy and that you're well. And I am a Facebook follower of yours, so I see your stuff when you post it almost every day when you're on. So God bless you. Stay well, my dear friend, and I will talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here today. What a treat.
It's a blessing. You guys have a great show. And again, take care, my friend.
You too, my man. Be well.
Thanks for coming in,
And
Jer.
be safe.
You betcha, Pat.
We'll see you Tuesday.
Okay. You guys mentioned the trivia there. You were telling me a story on Facebook that I thought was interesting involving, I think you said it was Tom Moore? Or someone named Tom?
Could
Okay,
very
maybe.
well be. I don't remember the one you're talking about. More information if you have it.
Where they called in and you did. Hold on. Let me pull it up. Pat, go ahead and ask a question if you have anything, and I'll find this thing.
You see me moving around and tilting my head and all. On my screen, everybody's on different portions of the screen, so I used to looking people in the eyes, and that's what I'm doing, tilting my head so I can look people in the face. And my apologies.
No, that's okay. Sorry, I'll find this and let you in on, or remind you once I find it.
Okay.
It's
Here,
just somewhere buried.
I was gonna say, can I ask a question? Jerry kind of brought up a little bit about it, but I said to Patrick, I said, with you being in the industry that you've been in, you've got to remember what you were doing on 911. Were you working on in a station at that time? Did you, how involved were you with reporting that? I was kind of wondering.
Not one iota.
Oh, okay.
And the reason was, Linda and I woke up that morning and saw what was happening in Manhattan. And my wife, God rest her soul, she worked in Manhattan for about 5 or 7 years and knew the area that was being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Well, by the time I got to work, I got the word from the front office that I was off the air for a month and they were going to carry only network news. So I came back the next month and we did several days of open phones and talked about the incident.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But that was it. I was not working at 9/11. I was told I couldn't go on. Everybody was off the air, including me,
Mm-hmm.
and they ran network coverage. That was it.
I remember back
Wow.
then when I used to listen to Mike Trevisano up here in Cleveland, and he was he passed away here about a year ago, or a little less than a year ago, and I religiously listened to that guy, and he was an Italian, and he was old Italian, he was paisano and all that stuff, and
I love it.
He when 9/11 happened, he had a co-host by the name of Kim Mahalik, I think it was. Well, the day that happened, he got in one hell of a fight with her over why it happened and everything like that. And she ended up at the end of that show, they went right to network broadcasting, and it was on for the broadcast. That broadcasting went on for a good couple of weeks. All they did was cover the 9/11 and what was going on down there and how it was going on, and they had reporters here and reporters talking about this and what are we going to do. And
I
it wasn't
get it,
until about
I didn't work for a month.
it wasn't until about 2 or 3 weeks later they came back, and there was never a mention of that fight with her. And it was I thought it was because of the fight, but the way you're talking, it may not have been. They may have just decided to do the network stuff for the 2 or 3 weeks until it all calmed down.
Wow.
9/11 for me was just one of the worst things I ever lived through. I had a good life going. I was working for Chrysler full time finally after several years of layoffs and crap. And I got up at 9 o'clock in the morning, turned the TV on, and there it was. Nobody had any idea that was coming. And it was when it hit, you thought, what the hell is this guy trying? What is going on here? And then the other plane hit, and right then, when that second plane hit, you knew this nation was under attack. And it was just unbelievable. In fact, I'll tell you what, I got an 8-minute clip here. Why don't we go into that?
Hold on, Pat. I just want to bring up something I was making reference to a couple minutes ago. It's the story that you were telling on Facebook, Steve, about your trivia question on the Outsiders, and somebody named Tom was listening and called in, and you did like...
I was doing, on WGAR, one night, I was doing one of my trivia sessions, a question about the Outsiders. And this is the Outsiders when Sonny Geraci was the lead singer, obviously. So in the middle of all of this, I finally got an answer, but I got a second right answer from a guy by the name of Tom. And I said, well, how do you know so much about the Outsiders? He said, I wrote the song, Time Won't Let Me. And I was one of the Outsiders. So he was listening to me that night and actually called into the show. I've had that happen a couple of times. I left WTVN to go to Orlando, Florida. A friend of mine went from being a salesman at WHLO in Akron to being the general manager at WKIS in Orlando.
I know
and they
that
were now
station.
News Talk and wanted me for the morning show. So at one point, I'm doing a trivia question. And in the middle of the question, my wife, who produced my show, gets on the intercom and said, there's a man on the phone. He said, you're talking about him on the air, and he wants to talk to you right now. Well, I didn't know what was going on. And I said, okay, put him on. You just did a question on your trivia show? Yes. What question was that? The one about Sky King? Yeah. Why are you doing that question? Well, because first of all, I love the show, and it's a great trivia question. He said, well, I am Sky King. I said, what? Wait a minute. Who? My name is Kirby Grant. If you remember me, I'm the actor who played Sky King. And then he started laughing and couldn't stop. Well, come to find out, part of Universal Orlando was a thing called, or maybe Disney even, was called the Florida Experience. He was the PR director. He retired to Florida and became the PR director for the Florida Experience. So he and I got to know each other. And actually, he took me on a tour of the Florida Experience. And for the first time in my life and never again, I tasted deep fried gator tail.
Oh, yuck.
If there is such a, well, I was going to say F, but yuck really kind of sums it up in a nutshell. But, oh, this is very good, Kirby. Thank you so much. You know, liar, liar, pants on fire. But, you know, here's a guy that I grew up with on television. I'm going to go tell him the truth, you know. Plus, he was in charge of a big facility in Orlando. It was great fun meeting him. A wonderful man. And he's on the way to a space shot after I'd left Orlando. He's on his way to cover a space shot in Cape Canaveral. And some idiot ran him off the road and killed him and his wife.
Oh.
He was only 72 years old.
I've been down.
That broke my heart because I really had a ball. He all of a sudden called in out of the blue and wanted to go on the air because I was talking about him on the radio.
I've been down there I saw pretty much every shuttle that ever went up once. Not every one, but I've seen like Discovery, the Challenger. I was in Florida the June before the Challenger blew up. I was there the mission before, and so I'm very aware of the
I was at
Canaveral.
WHLO. I'm sorry. I was WHIO in Dayton the day the Challenger group blew up, and I was on the air when it happened. And one of the things that, okay, let me put this properly. The teacher who was killed in the Challenger explosion deserved all the credit as a civilian for what she was doing for the educational system.
Yeah.
And deserves every accolade she could attain. But there was a woman from Ohio who also died in the Challenger crash. An engineer by the name of Judith Resnick from Akron.
Resnick, yeah.
Now there is a high school, a middle school named after her. But there is now a coin being cast that has Krista McCullough's likeness on it. 2 women died in that crash, and one of them is an Ohioan. Judith Resnick, I believe, should also get a coin.
I believe that too. I definitely believe that too. That whole thing was a shame that it happened. But it was almost.
But that's only me.
It was almost typical corporate greed, if you look at why they launched it and all that. And that thing should have never been in the air, at least at that point in time, because of the icing and all that crap. I kind of wanted, and I would have, if I could get down there, I'd go down there and watch that Artemis go. That is going to be one hell of a rocket. I think we locked up again.
No, we're still here. Oh.
Yeah. He'll come back here.
Hi, America. I'm back.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. I think that
Cleveland, I'm back. One or the other.
I think that Artemis rocket's going to be one hell of a rocket. I'm going to watch that on TV. I just wish I could be down there where I used to watch the shuttle go up. There's this little place down there off of I-1 that was about 5.5 miles from the shuttle, and the 39A and B. And I would just love to be in that spot when that thing goes up. That is going to be a hellacious rocket.
I think that whole process is absolutely astonishing. And every time I got a chance to watch a space shot on television, I did. We actually once stood on the building on the roof of the building at WKIS in Orlando, and could see the rocket leaving the launching pad on the east coast of Florida at Cape Canaveral. It was amazing.
My mother lived over by UCF, and I was down there when they sent one of the rockets to Mars. You know, that one of the rovers to Mars, and boy, that was an awesome look. That big old jetpack going up there, that rocket pack, with that, you could see that she, like I said, she was about 15 or 20 miles from Canaveral straight over. And what a shot. I loved going. That's one of the big reasons I like to get down there. I always tried to time it around a launch.
The conspiracy theorists must be really upset that none of the Mars landers found any little green men.
Oh, they're hiding it. Didn't you know that?
Ah.
They've got it hidden.
Like the structures on the dark side of the moon. Have you ever heard that conspiracy?
Yeah, I've heard that one too.
Oh, boy.
We do a show on Sunday mornings. It's called The Lore Hunters. And we discussed that at one point. And the Martians, we go into, this morning we talked about cryptids, Ohio cryptids. Your Mossman, the Mothman, the Grassman, Bigfoot in the Cuyahoga Valley. All kinds of good stuff like that.
Thank God for George Norrie. Continue to keep that alive.
Don't you believe
Well,
it?
listen, I love doing the all-night show. But I would get off at 10 or midnight, and I would actually turn the station on the car home, on the way home, just to listen to George Norrie, because all the stuff he got into and gets into this day, absolutely astonishing.
You believe in Bigfoot?
Huh?
Do you believe in Bigfoot? You think there is one? Or several?
It's entirely possible. But very honestly, they are still discovering critters of all kinds that date back eons. I mean, think about it. What was that one fish that they went after and actually found?
That they
Can
found?
you think of the name of the fish?
They had the Loch Ness Monster, but I don't know if they ever found that.
The coelacanth?
Coelacanth, that's it. I thought you were going to say Charlie Tuna. I have lost the picture, guys. Can you help me out?
Well, hold on a second. I'm not on camera, but can you see me now?
No.
Okay.
All I see is Zoom 1 on the screen.
Oh, that's strange.
We didn't change anything here.
Nah, but on just with how things have evolved over the years, do you think it would be hard to cover a story on the air like the Challenger or Elvis dying now with social media and that so much information is coming out so fast you don't know what's accurate and what's not. Would that make it harder to cover a story like that?
If you are a legitimate news person who has a specific regime that you follow to bring the correct story to the public, it is possible to do that. On the other hand, I constantly get pop-ups on my cell phone that talk about Elvis being alive and showing pictures of what he looks like.
Okay.
So that's you've got to, as a viewer and as a listener, you have to be discerning in your tastes. You've got to be sure that you're getting the correct story. And as a reporter, you've got to be sure you're reporting the story correctly.
Okay.
But, you never know.
Because social media, I feel like, is a good thing, but it's also a fountain of misinformation. Because people want to be the first to report, and in order to be the first to report, they might not be getting, and maybe I'm off, but, in order to be the first to report, they might not be getting all their facts straight.
Indeed, and that's not a new phenomenon. I mean, that kind of thing has been going on for decades. Reporters have done that time and again over the years, even before electronic media was a reality. So it happens even to professional journalists in a hurry to get something in print or on the screen or on radio.
It does seem like
adage, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
And that's become more prominent in this day and age, I think anyway, which contributes to incorrect reporting of a specific story and a lot of peripheral stuff that is cultivated by social media and on social media. I think social media loves having that kind of content on their particular system, and they don't make the person reporting the story be accurate. All they want to do is get racy, zany, outlandish material on their social media, because I don't think they hold to the same standards that professional media, i.e. newspapers, television, radio, yada, yada, do, and they just put it on whatever it is. And I'm not sure it's a good thing. Actually, from the way you're talking, I get the impression you don't think it's a good idea.
No. And, what I'm saying is, even the news outlets, they want to be first, but it feels like there's a lot of times with big stories where the first outlet to report it is not always getting the facts straight.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the big networks, I'm not going to say because I don't want them to hear and maybe get us in trouble, but there was a story a few years ago where they reported something, it was completely false, but they were trying to be first, and I think they ended up, there was a lawsuit against them because of it.
Was a Clinton operative who became a media celebrity involved in that?
I think so, yes.
That's what I thought too, yeah. I'm not mentioning names.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there were people who called him a Clintonista. I think it was.
Yeah.
The right-wingers called him that,
Yeah.
Anyway. You got to wonder how much effect social media has had on, and I'm not trying to get political here. This is just a reference. We don't talk much as far as politics on this station just because of the fact that we've learned we don't do it. It's not...
Point of contention.
I don't happen to be a stiff-necked kind of guy ordinarily, but one of the phenomena I have seen on social media annoys me. I want to see a person reporting or at least hinting at an existing story,
Right.
putting together an entire declarative sentence without questionable language.
Oh, Steve, you and I are going to get along fine. There
You
is.
know, I hear so much of the F-bomb being exploded in social media reporting and exchanges between people in social media. I kind of get annoyed.
I'll tell you what annoys me too is the fact that some of these reporters, even, especially the locals here lately, cannot say the letter T for X. You know, it's like it doesn't exist. Or,
The letter P as in Paul?
that one, I think that's one too. I'm trying to think of the word that I've heard that's the worst of the. They'll sit there and talk, and all of a sudden it's like a letter's disappeared. And
T for Thomas, you mean?
yeah, T.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Give me an example.
I'm trying to think of the words that I want to use here.
Don't mention anybody's name, just something you've heard.
It just takes and annoys the living crap out of me that they're paying this reporter how much per clip that they're doing, and they can't even flip and use the English language correctly. Expertise. That's one of the words. Expertise. That just it's supposed to be expertise, and
That's right.
and they go on. Oh, it is expected, and it's expected that this guy did this. No, for crying out loud, learn how to talk before you pick up a microphone. That's been a pet peeve of mine.
There's nothing wrong with pronouncing the language properly and using all the vowels and consonants in each word properly. As a matter of fact, that makes you a little bit more reputable, I think, and understandable.
As a matter of fact, that makes
Oh,
you more reputable.
Keith, you're getting an echo, and hi, Keith.
Hi, Keith.
He's muted.
Okay, he's muted. Sorry about that, Steve. We just had somebody else pop in here. You know, that's the kind of stuff that just irks the living crap out of me. These people are getting how much for doing this stuff, and they can't even flip and talk. You know, that it just, ugh. And
It's all about the short with the younger generation, and I would assume you don't know this. I'm part of the younger generation there, Steve. I'm in my late 20s, so I could say that's part of the younger generation. They just are lazy with their words. It's all about the abbreviations.
I think he locked up again.
Oh,
And that's because of texting and
yeah, social media.
social media, exactly.
So, unfortunately.
Hey, he's back. Welcome back, Steve.
I'm back. I
So-
did it myself.
Oh.
Isn't that amazing? I did it myself. You tech wizards didn't even help me this time. I did it myself.
But, anyway, did you catch what I had said, Steve, before it froze out? It seems like now, in this day and age, as being a part of the semi-younger generation, I'm in my late 20s, that my generation and the generation below me, they're very lazy with their words. They are all about abbreviations because of social media and texting. Would you agree?
That's a fair assessment. I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah. And there are a couple of expressions that get used a lot that annoy me, and nobody agrees with me on this. But the expression, especially when a couple is not together, my baby's daddy, or baby daddy, or mommy daddy, you know, that kind of stuff gets to me also, you know.
Yeah.
You're my brother from another mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think Steve Fuller once called me that, a brother from another mother. Yeah. I loved Steve Fullerton, by the way. A great reporter, a great personality, and one of the terrific talents I got a chance to work with at WHLO.
But yeah, there's a lot of weird abbreviations, or like you said, baby daddy, baby mama, like, that's, well, and that wasn't, back in the day, that wasn't a thing. If somebody had a kid with somebody, they would get married.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing that somebody would have babies with 6 different women. That wasn't a
And
thing.
that happens, it does.
Yeah. Or at least back in the day, I guess, to say, that wasn't a popular thing and people wouldn't know about that. Nowadays, people are posting pictures of themselves with the different people and the different babies, so it's way more known. But that wasn't as known about back then as it is now, which is.
But then on the flip side, I worry about that generation of children. What are they going to be like?
They're not going to have that. They're not going to have that structure, because most of the time the parents don't get along.
And that's
in that
why,
case,
that's why she's my baby's mama, because they just are not getting along and they separated. I'm with another woman, and the other woman got pregnant, and now she's got children, and I don't know.
Where do you think it
I'm
started?
not talking sin here. I'm talking responsibility. You know what I mean?
Where do you think it started?
That's the irresponsibility and common sense,
Yeah.
which that's no longer a thing nowadays.
Those are 2 words that don't seem to exist in our vocabulary these days. Common sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Where do you think it started, Steve? I have my own opinion, but I'm wondering what yours is.
Say again.
Where do you think this decrepitness of the generation started? Where do you think it started going downhill?
When did it start?
Yeah, when? Give me a year.
I can't really tell. There are some that will say, "Oh, those damn hippies back in the '60s, they started this whole thing," and I'm not sure I agree.
Well, it seemed like when you had the Woodstock and you had the free love and all that back in the mid '60s, and you had that war going on that everybody was singing about. It was the best music that pretty much was ever produced in a lot of people's eyes. But I think I've always attributed that to the fact that women felt themselves free and could have babies and not be in wedlock. It seemed like that was the place that it all started. We could almost blame it on Richard Nixon, for crying out loud, but we won't do that. But
there are couples. There are couples who are not, quote unquote, married, that are responsible to each other and to their children. I've seen a lot of that in this day and age. Mm-hmm. But there are some that approach the whole thing rather casually, which is unfortunate.
And you just got to wonder how the kids are going to turn out. I know 2 of my children are on here now. Say hello, Justine.
Hi, Justine.
And say hello, Melanie. You there?
Melanie left like 20 minutes ago.
Melanie left?
Yeah.
Nice of her to tell us.
Well,
she did. You just don't pay attention to the messages.
Eric,
I had a dad who didn't want me to get on the radio.
Eric,
and
that's one.
My mother said, "Jack, leave him alone. I know this boy of ours. He's going to make out okay." My mother was right.
When I was raised, I was put to work when I was 14, and I pretty much worked until I was 67, and of course I had my down years. There was layoffs and everything like that, but I'd always dreamed about owning a radio station though, And then when the circumstances presented themselves, that's when we started this here. I had about a year before that. It was when Erik and I met with this other station that was an internet radio station, and that's where him and I. But it's amazing that I think the most beneficial thing from this, and I've learned two things in this whole experience. Number one, I love podcasting. This is a blast. I love talking to people like yourself. I love getting a crew together and having a good time, and everybody sits and enjoys listening to us. And the other thing is, I've learned that there is quite a bit of joy in putting the everyday stuff together on this. You know, you're collecting the music to put it together. You put the station on the air. You play stuff from the 60s and 70s and 80s that not only you want to hear, but everybody else seems to want to hear too. I don't care what kind of a listenership we get as far as on the station. I'd like some, but I love listening to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and that's why I do it. What's your biggest joy in this stuff?
Disco sucks. I hate that phrase because disco music had live musicians, had harmony like the old doo-wop stuff, where you cannot say that Earth, Wind and Fire was a lousy band because they were a tremendously talented bunch of people. And that was considered disco at one point. It was music you could dance to, but these were instrumentalists actually playing their instruments, not relying on electronics or anything else, except maybe a keyboard. And I love that kind of music. KC and the Sunshine Band.
Yeah.
They all played their own instruments, that kind of thing. Now, I did go to one of the casinos here in the Poconos, and I saw Tavares, the Tramps, and one other group I forgot. They worked with tracks, music tracks, but they all sang, and it was fun to watch. And I got news for you. All of us elder citizens leaped to our feet and were dancing in the audience.
I can relate to that.
While these people did their thing. And we had Taste of Honey.
Oh, yeah.
Taste of Honey was a female guitar player and a female bass player with backup singers. The two ladies played their instruments and performed to a track that ran behind them, but it was terrific stuff. So there were so many good things about different aspects or eras of American popular music. I love doo-wop, the harmony stuff of that, and the stupid songs they would come up with that were really big hit records. I loved the 60s because there was experimental stuff going on, and people like the British invasion was happening. Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons kept American rock alive. Motown was still cranking out hit after hit, even in the middle of the British invasion. That was a fun series of history to watch. And then in the 70s, some of the disco stuff and some of the new rock sounds that came in. I just did some research for a friend of mine and discovered that the first big hit of the 70s was David Lee Roth, along with Van Halen, doing Jump.
Yep.
And I love that song, And during the 70s, also good music, including the disco stuff. And then, of course, in the 80s. And the first big hit of the new century was Children of Rockers. What the first big hit record was in the turn of the century? Wilson Phillips.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know who Wilson and Phillips were related to?
The Phillips was, John Phillips is from
the Mamas and Papas.
Mamas and
Papas.
Mamas and Papas and the Beach Boys.
Yeah, that Brian
Those
Wilson
were
from the
kids
Beach
of those
Boys.
two rock groups of the 60s.
Yep.
So history repeats itself, but they had their own thing going on. I'll tell you, rock and roll in general, since the beginning of the 1950s, I think it's great fun to watch it unfold. I've loved it.
It's amazing that they're remaking so many of the songs too. I know my grandkids. I'll hear a song and I know that song, but it doesn't sound like that. You know, you're talking
I
as
was
far.
at Coconut Grove the night Jim Morrison exposed himself. I saw it happen. I was the second radio guy, maybe the third, to have the Led Zeppelin in studio for an interview. And I still don't believe it. Without Jimmy Page.
That leads me into something else. You guys were kind of talking about, like Pat was saying, what he's kind of learned as he's gone through the owning the station and stuff. My end of hosting and co-hosting, I've also learned that building relationships with guests and stuff, and that is something we've really started to do in the last couple months, where we've been having a lot more guests on our shows to build relationships, and that is very important. And like you said with Led Zeppelin, that might not have been the only time you've had them in studio, because that was the first, that was you building a relationship.
And
am I right there?
Building a relationship also not only with the talent or the people, but with the people who handle those people, that really I have found pays off. One of the sad stories about the Led Zeppelin was Robert Plant invited me to come to a concert at a big auditorium in Jacksonville, Florida. And he said, when you get here, let me know you're here. Come back to the dressing room. They were just about to go on. I went back to the dressing room. Everybody said, hi, Steve, good to see you, so on and so on. Jimmy Page said, who is this guy? Get him out of here. Jimmy Page was known for not being tremendously cooperative with the media, but a tremendous guitar player, unbelievable guitar player, one of the best in rock and roll. Anyway, enough of my pontificating.
There was a word that came out of Erik's mouth here a second ago, important. That's one of the key words that really sets me off. I hear important or important. Yeah, important. That's the usual reporter word. Like we were talking about. It's important, not important. Oh, it's really important that they important,
Okay, you can get off your soapbox now.
Back in the day, that if I'm going to be in the media, I should be able to use all of the vowels and consonants of a word that we use to allow everyone to understand what you're saying. Now, them saying it that way, you can understand still, but it just, in my opinion, ain't professional.
And I feel like the younger generation tries to talk really fast, which isn't good either, because you're not enunciating the words correctly by talking fast.
I know all of the expressions and the phrases and the terminology very well, but when I'm on the job, I try as hard as I can to pronounce words properly. And there are some people who just think that's being very silly and stagnant and ridiculous. You got to talk the language that we're talking now, yada, yada. Do that on the corner. Don't do it when you're performing live on a podcast or a radio show,
Exactly.
I know. Only my opinion.
I have a question for Steve. A curious question, but based on what we've been talking about the lexicon of the current culture that we live in. And I have some friends that are school teachers of varying levels of education, grade schoolers, high schoolers, assistants to professors in college. And one of the things that I found out is they are not teaching cursive to students anymore. And there is also a very high percentage of them that do not know how to formally type. They can sit there and go like this on their phones, but you put them in front of a keyboard and they're like D, E, A, no, D, E, A, R. And then my question to you is, and I've talked to them about this, what do you think this means for our future in people looking back at our culture? Because like right now, if you go back 300 years, 200 years, you have text.
I kind of figured out if you
He's just.
Huh?
It's going to take a second. He's locked up again. Evening, Keith.
Hello, Pat and gang.
How the heck are you?
One of my word pet peeves is wash.
Wash.
Hey, whereas you are, spell the word.
I'm going to do the washing.
And my wife's is library.
Library?
He's back.
Yeah.
If I remember, if I got the gist of your question, it diminishes the size or the number of communicators that we have in our world. People who can actually communicate in any way, shape, or form. You know, hey, listen, even when I was a kid on the corner, I could talk all the jargon that was on the street during that era. But we have to have people who can communicate properly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm
wrong on that, but you know.
Because when you broke up there, one of the points I was going to make was, you look back. I'm not sure exactly when. I'm blanking on when the Project Gutenberg started about the printing press. Because before then, you go back 300-400 years, the only people that could read and write were scholars and people in the church.
Yes.
And you going forward, and you had the Project Gutenberg, and you have the printing press, and people were beginning to read and everything. And now you're looking at us in 2022. You have people that can't type. You have people that cannot write cursive. And you have people that, like we just said, do not have a master on the English language. What is that going to show for us in 50 years, 100 years, when historians look back, and they can look back and say, this is the Gettysburg Address, 7 years ago, and then you go back, we the people, you're looking at all these historical texts. What are we going to have for our society in 50 to 100 years when we're in this state?
There was an Akron-based group that may have zeroed in on something, a rock group. The rock group was Devo.
Yeah, I know.
And Devo stands for de-evolution. Could Devo have been right and we are de-evolving? I don't know.
I went to school with Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo.
Did you really?
Yeah. He graduated a year before I did.
A lot of good people came out of Akron Canton. I'll tell you, Ruby and the Romantics back in the 60s.
Edgar Nash, or Ruby Nash, which was Edgar Nash's sister, who I worked with at Chrysler.
Oh, no kidding.
I knew him really well, yes.
And the OJs.
Yeah.
They credit Philly as being their big break, very honestly, but they were from Canton, and they did a lot out of Cleveland before they got, I think they were with Gamble Huff, did a lot of writing and producing for them when they were in Philadelphia. But the OJs are Akron Canton groups, too.
Wow. Akron has had its influence on rock and roll pretty much.
Wait a minute.
Even
who's the woman from Akron?
Hines, or not Hines.
Patty.
Chrissy Hines.
Christy Hines. Yeah. Christy Hines, yeah.
Her group, they were Akron based.
We've had quite a few.
Yep. I love rock and roll. Almost any generation. I'm not a big fan of rap per se. I think hip hop is fun, but what's happened to rock and roll since the dawn of the '50s, when the doo-wop groups started putting together that kind of music, it's been fun to watch, and it's been fun to listen to, and seeing all of the changes in rock and roll and the expansion of the idiom, the medium. I think it's a heck of a thing to have watched. I've loved it.
Yeah.
Could rap be what is damaging our language by them using slang, and that's popular with the young people, so maybe that's where they're learning how to incorrectly pronounce.
Too. You're absolutely correct. But the reality was, at least back in my day, we talked that way, but we knew how to speak correctly, to write correctly, to type correctly, and in a formal encounter, we would use appropriate language and we would say it properly. On the corner, we might have done just as badly with the language as everybody is doing today, but we knew how to do it the appropriate way. And I'm not sure I sound like a stiff-necked individual. I don't want to be that way, but that was the reality of that era.
I feel like even in school, they're not as strict to correct people.
I remember in school where if I was to talk, if I missed a T in important or something like that, and I had a teacher that was, especially with the language arts teacher or something, man, I'd be writing that word over and over and over again until I knew how to say it right. And that's the problem with a lot of these the education today. It doesn't seem like they're spending enough time with these kids to actually teach them how to talk right, or how
Thank
to
you
how
for
to
being
pronounce.
the one to bring up education, because I was just about to, but I tend to beat that dead horse. So I'd rather it be you than me.
The education part of this is where a lot of it comes from. And back in Stephen and my day, if we got out of line like that, it was a whole different thing than it is nowadays.
It's
Nowadays,
different agenda nowadays than it was back in our time.
people are saying you can't do that to kids. You'll injure their psyche. You can't, it's being cruel and unusual. You can't do that. Well, what kind of a generation are we producing? That might be a good question to ask as a result of that.
If it was, as far as corporal punishment and stuff like that in the schools, I never really believed in that. If they wanted corporal punishment, they could tell me what my kid did, and I'd decide if it was a corporal punishment thing or not. And that my kids were pretty lucky because I never really expressed what I would have probably gotten had I been in the same situation. I know I've had trouble with a couple of my children in the 6th and 7th grade areas. And what was that, Justine?
I don't know who you're talking about.
My father was the aggressive one in my family. And although he only laid his hand on me once, he was fairly loud and boisterous when it came to discipline. On the other hand, my mother, who was a teacher, and a very good teacher who worked with learning disabled children, she would give us the look. And that was all it took.
The look.
Betsy and I would reform immediately when my mother gave us the look.
This goes back to something we talked about earlier, the whole baby mama, baby daddy thing. Because the kids do not have, I mentioned structure. They don't have, most of the time, they don't have the structure in the home. Because usually it's a single parent raising them, and they, that single parent might be working 2 or 3 jobs, so there's nobody at home with that child, or that teenager in that case.
My kids had an absentee dad as well, Betsy and I, and not really absentee per se, but he was an absentee dad because my father was a golf freak and absolutely a tremendous golfer into his 90s. So we, in order to survive his love of golf, we all learned to play golf. My mother, my sister, and myself. But it was, they were a team, and they made sure they were both on the same page. Now, they handled the discipline differently, but it was effective.
Yeah, as far as the look goes, that's how my kids knew that they were right on the fringe. I used to use the dad look all the time, and my mother did the same thing with me. That's where I learned it. You know, I knew how far I could push her buttons, and when I got that look, I ducked.
Yep, well, father and mother should be good cop and bad cop. I mean, that's the approach to discipline they should be using, but on the same page to accomplish the same goal.
Yeah, it's
too
not
many
like
kids nowadays don't have that. Like they only have one parent, so not to say a single parent can't do it, but I think in that situation would be harder to do just because of.
I was just gonna say you can't knock single parents because I know plenty of kick-ass single parents that do the job.
I know some too.
I'm saying it would be harder, I would think.
And I would think so too, but we can't knock them because.
Oh, I'm not knocking. Like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
said, I'm not
Be
knocking.
careful. Be careful. We don't ruffle feathers around here. I think we've been down that road before.
I always wondered what happened. I never got in trouble much growing up, but I always wondered what came after 2. I know my dad would get the 1.
Oh.
He would get the 2. He would get the 2.5. He was a platoon sergeant in the 5th Army in the 70. He was the platoon sergeant in the 71st Infantry 5th Army under Patton. 17 years old, 3 days out of high school, was in boot camp. 3 months later, he was on the soil in West Germany. So that he had good discipline in my family, but I always wondered what happened after 2.5. I never did find out.
What the heck?
I wish I knew.
Yeah, I don't know either. I just,
the thing
I'm not
I
sure
used
how
to-
everyone else was raised, but my dad would always start with 1, get the 2.
You won't like it. You've got until 3. That's 2. You won't like it if I get to 3. I'll guarantee you that.
Well, I learned that my dad actually did like me because he did go to 2.25 and 2.5.
I've been to 2 and 3, 2 and 5, 2 and 9, or 2 and 7/8 with my kids.
Because I know if he didn't like me, he would have went to 3.
Yep. That's the way it works. You know that, and it's just holding it over the kids. That's the way your discipline and everything of them is. They know how, your kids know how far they can push your buttons. My kids always knew that, and when they did cross the limit, they knew what was going to happen to them. You know, which normally was a spank on their rear end or something like that, or they got grounded or something like that when they got older. But that the discipline part of that is necessary, and it's not really being achieved in anything, especially the schools nowadays. And how long has it been since you've heard of a kid getting paddled in school? They don't do it. But I'm going to tell you what, you let me know that kid's been acting up, especially if it's one of my relatives or something like that, or somebody that's living in this house, that kid's going to get corrected. Because I am the ruler of this house, and everybody knows it.
My father-in-law used to have to do that at higher when he taught there. He had the paddle. Then he would go to the center of the hallway where it would echo up the steps and all through the building.
How long ago was this, Keith?
Let's see. He retired. Well, he's no longer with us. He retired in the 90s. Somewhere. No, I got married in 99. About 2K, somewhere around in there, he retired. But before that, I don't think they were spanking at all.
Well, they haven't spanked since the late 70s, I think.
Oh, they did it when I was in there. I wasn't a recipient, but it was done when I was at higher.
Well, in my high school because I graduated in '93, and there was still paddling then in Green. I don't know about any other school districts, but I know we still had paddling. It wasn't very often, but I know that it was occurring then.
Now, my mother remembers the days in grade school when the teacher could rap you on the knuckles with a ruler. And
I've gotten that
you gotta
before.
Remember, my mother grew up during the 19-teens, and wow.
I've gotten that before.
I guess they maybe still do it in Catholic school, but it was unusual.
I was in 6th grade, and I was holding my pencil wrong, and we had this witch that was a teacher, and she come by my desk and seen me holding that pencil. I got big hands as it is, and I'm holding this little dinky pencil. I just couldn't get it right.
And you have arthritis to this day because of it. Yeah.
That's exactly right. How'd you guess? And it went into my back, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay. I love it. Oh, I got a trivia question for you guys.
Go ahead.
I'll name an actor or actress, and you give me their counterpart in movies as a power couple. There were lots of power couples in movies, people who appeared together.
Okay.
And were known for appearing together. Like, for instance, who would have been June Allison's major counterpart?
Oh, dear.
June Allison was...
Oh, I can see her.
Robert Young?
All I can think of is Rock Hudson. But
Actually, the funny part about it is, aside from this question, she was married to Dick Powell for years. But there was one actor, one of the best actors in Hollywood, that was her male counterpart in several films, and they were known for that. James Stewart.
James Stewart, wow.
Now, who was the female counterpart in some really hot movies for Robert Mitchum?
God. I can think of the one that he was in The Day the original The Day the Earth Stood Still, and I can picture that woman that was with him. Oh my.
I'll name two of the movies. Macau and My Kind of Woman, or His Kind of Woman. For me, that was the hottest movie couple aside from Bogey and Bacall. Jane Russell.
oh, okay.
Also, who was Alan Ladd's female counterpart? They did several movies together and were considered a hot screen couple.
That one you got me on.
And I apologize, this is a little before your time. But still.
Well, I at least know some of
Don't pick on me, I'm old.
I was going to say, I at least know some of the, Robert Mitchum, Alan Ladd, but knowing the,
Veronica Lake.
Oh, okay.
Now, who was Myrna Loy's male counterpart in several films? Actually, a series of very good films.
Myrna Loy.
I was going to say he is going back a ways there.
No guess?
No guess.
Probably no guess.
All right. Remember the Thin Man movies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
William Powell.
Wow.
And they were very good together. Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart, obviously. Okay. Who was Maureen O'Hara's favorite male counterpart?
John Wayne.
Yeah, bingo.
All right, Flora.
I got one.
Perfect.
Wait a minute. We gotta celebrate this.
What screen character do Alec Baldwin and Harrison Ford have in common?
Harrison Ford.
And Alec Baldwin.
Donald Trump.
No. No.
Now, this is in the past 20 years. Some of you guys ought to know that. I'll give you a clue.
Was it a Clancy movie?
That's exactly what my clue was going to be.
Keith?
What do you say?
We're dependent on you, Keith.
I can't think of the character's name. Dr. Ow.
The initials were J.R.
Ewing? No.
That's funny, Justine. That's what I was thinking.
J.R.
No idea. I'm probably going to kick myself in the butt for not knowing this because I probably know it.
I think he. I was going to say, did he lock up again?
Yeah, I think he locked up.
Quick look at him.
No.
Did he know the answer?
No.
No.
Jack Ryan.
Ah! I knew I was going to kick myself in the butt.
The second you say these names, I know them.
Okay.
I knew the answer, but I was muted.
Yeah, okay. That's your story, right?
Yeah. So was I.
I knew the answer because Jack Ryan was Alec Baldwin on the Hunt for October, and
that's right.
And Harrison Ford played Jack Ryan in what was the name of the movie?
Additional Tom Clancy books.
Yeah, I can't remember the book or the movie name, but yeah, I'm a Tom Clancy fan.
Let me see what else I got here. Okay. This was a controversial film directed by Bernardo Bertolucci, and it starred Marlon Brando and caused a great stir because butter was featured prominently in the film. What's the name of the film? This is really kind of a sick film, actually, but it was very controversial and highly attended. Oh, you dog! That's fun. I love it. The Last Tango in
Paris. I thought that at the beginning, and I thought it might be Last Tango, but not quick enough to say.
We had a meeting. We had a bunch of people who were listeners. We had kind of a reunion about 4 years ago in Marion, because a friend of mine who was my boss now lives there, and we all got together in a saloon, and we had team trivia deals. And very honestly, these questions got the same kind of. These are the questions I used, and they got the same kind of reaction. People fretted over them. But got them right, which is really just like you guys did, and it was great fun to see happen. I love this stuff.
I've always wanted to do a trivia show. I
am the king of trivia.
Yeah, we'll We'll give you that.
There you go, Pat. There you go.
We will give you that. It's about that time. I hate to break this. Steve, it's been a blast having you, man. Hopefully you'll come back and see us. I'd like you to at least consider being a regular every once in a while.
I would love to. I've enjoyed your company, all of you.
This was really a lot of fun.
Thanks to Erik for helping arrange this.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, I've enjoyed it very much. I think you guys are part of the wave of the future of broadcast.
I'm gonna give Erik a raise.
Ha.
Add another zero to his paycheck.
That's right.
Yep.
I think he dropped.
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. But
give it a couple more seconds here. Yeah, Erik, I'm going to give you a raise, bud. Well,
sounds good.
I'm going to double your salary here.
I'll be waiting for the check. I'll be waiting for the commission check.
The check's in the mail, bud.
Yeah. Anyway.
Famous last words. The check
I know.
Yeah, we'll give us a couple minutes to see if he makes it back in, and then we'll wrap it up for the week. This 2 hours, man. It went quick.
Yeah.
Amazingly quick.
I was shocked that I actually honestly did know that trivia question. I just didn't realize I was muted because I grew up reading a lot of Tom Clancy and watching all of his movies.
Yeah, looks like he's dropped. All right, well, we can go ahead and wrap this up for the day. I do want to personally thank Steve Cannon for coming in for the 2 hours. This was a lot of fun. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as we did. I think we should reach out to him and personally thank him and invite him back. So
okay.
Erik, you may want to do that. If you want help on what to say, just let me know.
Okay.
Well, next week we got we're going to kind of get back in the swing of things here. I did have in fact, let me end with I'm going to end with something here. Then we'll wrap it up after that.
I'm actually gonna jump off. Okay. So I will talk to y'all next week. I'll talk to you Thursday, Pat. Have a good one, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Bye, Erik.
Thanks, Erik.
You're welcome.
Hi, Erik.
Well, with that, I'm gonna just go ahead and call it quits here. The one bit I didn't. It's about 6 minutes long, and I don't want to wait for that out. So, anyway, we will go ahead and wrap it up here. You all have a splendid week. We're going to get back in the swing of things, as I said. We're all 5 of the podcasts are back in place again. Hopefully, I can get these on Spreaker now. If you listen to us this evening, you can find us on Twitch TV. Hopefully, you'll give us a like there and give us a follow if you can. Dale, where are you at, and when are you coming home?
Well, I'm on the southeast side of Dallas, just north of Hutchins. I think it's actually over near where
Sean lives.
Where Sean lives, and I think at least in that general area. And where's my phone? Here's my phone. I'm thinking, is it next week? Where's the calendar at? Alphabet. CAL. There it is. Calendar. Yeah, I'm supposed to be anywhere between the 17th through the 19th. Is when I'm supposed to be home.
Okay. That's about another week. So this is the 11th. So
It is in time for. I have my friend Josh. His birthday is on the 19th, and then somebody Pat and I both know, Christina. Her birthday's on the 21st.
Yeah.
From Mercy.
Oh, really?
And then I have another friend that has their birthday on the 26th.
You have another friend that's got one on the 27th.
Yeah, I was going to save the best for last. And then El Presidente is celebrating another revolution around the sun.
I'll be 27 this year.
Again.
In your dreams.
I'll be 28th for the 40th time.
Well, what is it? Let me do the math here so I can do it right here. 48 minus. Whoops. 48 minus. Yeah, yeah, that's right. 30.
Excuse me.
I'm 18 with 30 years experience.
You may have experience, but have you been experienced? That's an old, too bad Steve's gone. That's an old, what do you call it, line? Jimi Hendrix line. You're experienced, but are you experienced? Have you ever been experienced?
And have you ever taken a trip and never left your basement?
What's that other one? Most convenient thing about it is
turn on the radio.
Take a trip and never leave them. Take a trip and never leave the farm. All right, let's chop this off the legs here. Been great having y'all. It's been great being back. It's a hell of a show. I already thank Steve. Thank y'all for tuning in tonight. Justine, Melanie, Keith, Dale, Eric. Y'all been grand here. Well, don't know what's happening next week for this show, but Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, we're doing a special World According to Elmer show. That is going to be on electromotive pulse, EMPs, and we're also doing a CME, coronal mass ejection show. This is going to be, I'm going to take and do it on, because of the sunspots and everything the Earth has been getting hit by. I think it's the information I'm going to provide is going to be pretty good for you. If you get a chance, tune into that one. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Have a marvelous week. The Browns won this week. We never did get to talk about that. I do got something for that, though. I got to get there. Here it is.
Who let the dogs out? There we go, Brownies. There we go. There we go, Brownies. There we go. There we go, Brownies. There we go.
Overdriving it.
I saw you.
Overdriving it.
I saw you, Justine. Anyway, let's get out of here. We will see you all next week. 7-3, and talk to you.
Thanks, guys.
7-3.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation of Radioactive by the Crooked River Radio Network. See you again soon.
I hear it. Same voice as
This has been a Crooked River Media production.